Hello, my name is Jason Deater. I'm the First Responder Program Manager with the Mid-Atlantic Center for Emergency Management and Public Safety at Frederick Community College. Today, we're going to have a three-panel discussion regarding emerging issues and innovations in law enforcement. Today's panel consists of Captain Diane Hansen with the Maryland State Police. She's the commander of their training services. Next is Travis Walter. He is the Director of Crisis Services with the Mental Health Association of Frederick County. And last is Captain Kirk Henneberry. He is the Operations Commander of the Frederick Police Department.
My name is Captain Diane Hansen, and I am the Commander of the Maryland State Police Education and Training Division. That encompasses our Police Academy and our Professional Development section.
Thank you. So there's been some law changes, especially in the state of Maryland. In 2021, we learned about the Police Accountability Act, and they talk about de-escalation and forms of training. So what is the importance of de-escalation training in law enforcement, and what methods are used to evaluate police officers or Maryland State Troopers' effectiveness at de-escalating a situation?
Oh, that's a great question. What I'll say first is that de-escalation itself as a topic, it's obviously become more delineated in the last several years. I will say that de-escalation was utilized, but maybe under a different term or a different way of describing it I'd say back in the day. So we talked about, quote unquote, talking people down or reaching people on their level, right? So that's always been a conversation piece. So, and trying to resolve things as peacefully as possible. But what I'll say with de-escalation, again, as a concept or a training point, it actually has brought to law enforcement specific steps and definitions regarding, what de-escalation is and what the purpose of it is. So, with us having taught that over the last couple of years, troopers across the state have a better idea, a better understanding of what that means. And essentially what it means is, doing our best to resolve a situation as peacefully as possible without any kind of violence or any kind of physical contact, right? So bringing a situation down in a way where through maybe conversation or through, changing my tactics, I can meet with someone where they are, right? And maybe engage in a longer conversation instead of potentially forcing a physical altercation when it's not necessarily something that has to be done. I shouldn't say there's always, but there are times where, yes, there are situations because we're in law enforcement where there has to be some type of physical intervention. Absolutely, to save my life, to save your life, to save a citizen's life. That goes without saying. But de-escalation offers a whole variety of other ways to, if possible, prevent that situation from becoming physical, which is better pretty much for everybody, better for the citizen, and better for law enforcement, if that helps.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. A lot of people don't understand the training that goes in, like the Maryland State Police Academy or even any police academy. When we talk about de-escalation, we also, like you just hit on, we talked about defensive tactics. So how often do trooper candidates perform defensive tactics training in the academy? And how does your staff implement the de-escalation in their training scenarios?
So our academy lasts, I'd say it varies depending on whether or not there are holidays in that time of year. So it's almost 7 months, between 6 and 7 months. And there is some form of defensive tactics pretty much every week. So every week they're doing some sort, sometimes it's heavier, sometimes it's lighter. It depends on what the curriculum is for that week and where they are in their training. So the defensive tactics, of course, is teaching our trooper candidates, very basic to eventually complicated skills when it comes to, intervening in a physical way. But that is informed by de-escalation. So early in the academy, candidates are taught the concept of de-escalation and what it actually means, and about how we're trying to deal with people who are in crisis and come up with an alternative ways to assist, where again, we don't have to go hands-on and be physical. So it's early on in the academy where that concept is introduced to them. And then as they go through defensive tactics, that becomes utilized. Now, not in every situation. Sometimes we're learning how to do sort of ground fighting techniques or different holds and things like that. So that's just, you're physically doing something. Well, once you learn those skills and then you come together there to use them in a situation or a scenario, that's when the de-escalation piece comes into play. And so that's monitored and practiced through defensive tactics. One of the things that the Maryland State Police has been able to get about 2 years ago, we've gotten some more, It's an Apex virtual reality simulator, and I'm not sure if anybody's heard of what that is. It's actually a pretty neat system where a trooper or whomever is actually involved in a scenario, but it's through virtual reality. So they're wearing a headset, a backpack, and you have someone on the other side of the wall who's actually creating any number. It could be hundreds of scenarios from inside to outside, in a bar, in a residence, in a bedroom. It's endless, the number of options. And one of the primary skills that you're working on with the Apex is de-escalation, because when you're talking about virtual reality, of course, we're not to the point where we're physically engaging, right? So yes, you're encountering a person maybe on a traffic stop or who's having a mental health crisis outside of a residence, and what you're doing is practicing your tactics in terms of being in a safe position, right? Having cover, we like to have, and then utilizing your communication skills and your understanding of that person as much as you have to try and de-escalate or bring down that situation so that you can resolve it peacefully, and whatever that might mean. So maybe peacefully is getting an emergency petition and going for an evaluation. Maybe peacefully is just calming things down with no real formal police action. And maybe it's something that results in arrest. But so we assess, one of the ways we assess our de-escalation skills many ways, but that's one of the main ways that we use. And it's nice because it really can, again, put you in any type of scenario. So if that answers your question.
Yes, I mean, this video series is about innovation, and obviously that Apex system is a great innovation and a useful tool here in law enforcement that not many agencies have. So it's great that the state police does.
Well, and if you don't mind, one thing, if it's okay, I'd like to add to that is we did just initially get one system based on grant funding. And as you can imagine, we're a state agency. We have barracks all over the state. So troopers were getting exposed to it in annual in-service when we first got it. But again, for people who don't live anywhere not nearby, if they want to practice or access it to practice that stuff, it's very difficult. So we were able to use grant funding to actually get 2 more Apex systems. So right now we're in the process of moving those out to different areas of the state. So we'll have 3 locations, and we'll actually have people who are in the field who are trained to utilize that technology and trained to assess and practice de-escalation skills. So we've been able to sort of extrapolate, right, from just here and move out to different areas so that more people around the state have access to the system. And that's been helpful.
It'd be interesting to view that one time in the future.
Oh, you're always welcome to come down. I hadn't done it. And then finally I did it myself. And admittedly, and as much as it's not a real quote unquote scenario, one of the things that functions in training is honestly the fear of embarrassment, and the fear of your peers judging you. How are you going to do in this scenario? It's just the reality. And I remember going through it myself because obviously I wanted to experience it so I knew what other people were going through. And all those functions are in play. And again, it was a phenomenal experience. Like I said, it's so many endless different scenarios where you can use different skills. The person you're engaging with could have weapons, could not have weapons, could be in a car, outside of a car. So I feel like we're really getting the maximum benefit from it.
And I think that technology is only going to improve as we move on with what's available. Yeah. And it's kind of unique because we're going to switch into the kind of talking about when we talk about reviewing videos and stuff. Yes. The body worn camera has been a hot topic the past few years. I know personally being out in the public, seeing Maryland State troopers are wearing body cameras now. So based on the new Maryland law, which again, the Police Accountability Act of 2021, they required all Maryland police officers to have body cameras. Do you think will reviewing body camera footage help instructors identify training needs to enhance academy and in-service training? Oh,
100%. I mean, even prior to body cameras, I'll start when I was in the field as a barrack commander. We hadn't had them yet. We had in-car cameras, but it will be the same with body cameras. So supervisors have to review a certain number of recordings per month for each trooper. On top of that, the commander has to review stops and interactions quarterly. So there are always people looking at these interactions and checking them out. And the purpose of looking at them is to ensure that the person is using all the skills that they have. So if it happens to be de-escalation, it's de-escalation. If it's officer safety, if it's making the best decision when it comes to an arrest, all these things are being looked at. And so, and absolutely what will happen is a supervisor or a commander will observe that interaction or that video, and they'll make certain observations and say, wow, looking at this, I'm wondering if trooper so-and-so might need additional training in this area. Maybe they need additional training in assessing whether or not someone's impaired. Maybe they need additional training and learning how to talk to somebody a little bit better so that they get a better result. And literally we'll take that information and transition that into training. So that, that stuff is not just looked at and documented, it's utilized, when we see something that needs to be changed. So 100%, those factors are taken into account when we review those videos, and then interactions are had with the trooper. So it might just be informal training where we have a conversation, and then maybe it's a little bit more formal. It's one-on-one with the supervisor. And if things get to a point where they need a full additional level of training, something will be set up here at Education and Training where you can come back to, or the people who are accustomed to doing that training every day are. So we absolutely utilize that footage to make decisions and to improve our services.
It's great. So we're going to kind of transition into the community policing, and we talk about de-escalation. That's what the community expectations of the police now that you kind of hit on, and also the body cameras, just to make just the community sees more what the police is doing. So
Sure.
While community policing may look different for each agency depending on agency size and jurisdiction, local, state, and county, what are some ways the Maryland State Police as a statewide agency engages with the community?
Great question. I'll start that off by saying, as the commander of education and training, I spend time with our trooper candidates in the academy. And from the beginning to the end, I use a theme and I talk about public trust. And I emphasize how important public trust is and say, if you don't have it, you don't have anything. That could be the difference in many different situations. So one of the things that we need to do is build that public trust. And how do we build that public trust? Of course, it's one interaction at a time, but it's also by, specific events. So I'll say for the state police, some people have this, the idea that we are primarily traffic and highway, and then we do have a lot of that. But we also have full service barracks that do your traditional policing. But even for the ones that are quote unquote traffic, where you're on the highway, we do all kinds of activities that involve the public. I mean, of course, some of our bigger ones are ones related to Special Olympics. It is, the Maryland State Police Polar Bear Plunge, and then of course the torch run. So where we fundraise, and we also engage with Special Olympic athletes and their families to build those relationships. I mean, that's just one that comes to mind. A couple, I should say, one that has happened more recently in the last couple of years, and this is more of a community event. It's called Faith in Blue. If you ever decide to look it up, it's where law enforcement agencies develop relationships with local faith leaders and the community, and they have certain events. And usually there's a Faith in Blue weekend or a week where all kinds of activities, in a community are, where there's a lot of interaction with law enforcement and with the community, which also reminds me of National Night Out. Maybe you've heard of National Night Out, one night during the year, where law enforcement agencies really across the country spend time in the communities, set up in different areas. It might be a church or a community center, a park, an elementary school, where we spend time having human interactions, showing the cool stuff that we do, but also, building relationships, humanizing us, and also being human, and breaking down that sort of traditional structure or that we have. So showing people, hey, we're law enforcement, but we are human beings. And the reason we came on this job is because we care about you and we want to do right by you. And we want to make the necessary interventions. If it's helping you in this way, if it's arresting somebody, we want to do what that right thing is. So there are a few. I wrote a couple down. One of the things that we do in particular is we'll have open houses. So our headquarters just had a pretty big open house this past fall, open to the community to come in, see all the different things we have to offer when it comes to like technology. We have our dive team, we have our SWAT team, we have, of course, our K9 unit, which everybody loves. And then they'll have other activities like face painting and stuff for kids. So we have open houses at headquarters and at different barracks. And one of the other things that we do, which is ends up being more in-house for us, we've started over the last few years what we call a youth leadership event. And so for a Friday through a Sunday, and usually it's in August, we will invite youth across the state to actually come and experience what it's like, not just to be a trooper, but also to be a civilian employee. We have a lot of job opportunities that we need filled. So they spend the weekend here with us at the academy. They do stuff that's traditionally academy type stuff like exercising, but then they get exposed to all the different things that we have to offer in the Maryland State Police. Of course, our helicopter is always a big hit. So that comes and everybody wants to get pictures and stuff. But I guess, obviously I provided a whole bunch of examples, but there really are many different ways that we get involved. I forgot about shop with a cop, but the point is we understand the importance of having those connections and spending time with people and getting to know the citizens that we serve so that they feel comfortable coming to us, in their time of need, and a relationship of trust has been developed. Does that help?
Thank you. The Class 156 had like a record fundraiser for the Polar Bear Plunge or something, or they raised
had gosh, I don't want to, they raised around, in about a month, it's around $23,000.
That's
Which is,
incredible. So
we didn't put all this pressure on them because we didn't have much time because they just started, but they really took it seriously. Our classes usually do. Plus we like to win, and there's usually a competition associated with it. So I'm not even going to lie, because the academy class that raises the most gets a really big trophy. So it's good to have a little competition.
that's great. So one of the last questions, you just hit on it by talking about how you addressed the candidates in the academy, talking about community trust, but explain what skills you believe police officers, state troopers should have to make community policing successful.
Oh, that's a good question. I'll say skills and qualities, right? Because I think that those things come together. So I'll start with skills. Skills would be the ability to communicate with people, right? So communicate with people who are similar to you, different than you, and the ability to take the time to listen and have empathy and understand what's happening with the person so that you can help, make the best decision and steer the path in the best way. But I think, what comes with that is honestly is humility. Humility and empathy. So humility that, okay, yes, I have a certain amount of power that comes with this position, but that doesn't mean I need to have power over. In some situations, you have to have that when it's life or death, but that does not always have to be the case. So I need to be humble. And that's one of the things that we teach is being a human being with other human beings. Sometimes when people go through law enforcement training, it's very stressful. It's very structured. We have a paramilitary organization. So people can come out and tend to be a little robotic, not intentionally, but because they're so busy trying to remember everything that they have to do and maintain that professional standard or structure. And you have to remind them, like, hey, you're a human being as well. So in as much as there are certain responsibilities that you have to do as a law enforcement officer, number one is being able to, connect with people. So realistically, I'd say, I guess, primarily it's communication skills, but I mean, close to that is empathy and humility, because I think you have to be genuine for people to be able to trust you. Because if you're just putting on a show, the person isn't going to trust you. So you have to genuinely care and want to make those connections. So, I mean, that to me, it's again, a communication, but also the heart that comes behind that, the desire to make that connection and to do the right thing by people and have the best outcome. And essentially have everybody, I mean, I'm not saying that everybody's going to go home being happy all the time, but we would like that outcome where, okay, maybe this thing happened, this bad thing happened, or maybe it resulted in, maybe you did get arrested, but we made it the best experience that you could have, so that despite the fact that you're arrested, there was no belittling, or we're not necessarily judging you as a person. We're doing what we have to do in terms of our job and still treating you as a human being.
Well,
Does that
thank
answer
you.
your question?
Yes, you did. Absolutely. Is there anything else that you'd like to add that you think the viewership would want to know, or?
Well, I mean, I'll say this, I appreciate people taking the opportunity to ask these questions, because it helps us if we have the chance to share with people the training that we have, the perspective that we have, and also the fact that we're trying very hard to learn as much as we can so that we can be as open-minded as possible and as connected as possible. Because again, we'll go back to de-escalation. What do we want at the end of it? We want a positive outcome, or an outcome that's as positive as it can be. I can't think of anything else.
Well, I really thank you for your time today. I know you're very busy with the, you have in-service going on too, don't you?
Never too busy for you, my friend.
Today we have with us Travis Walter. He's the Administrative Director of Crisis Services with the Mental Health Association of Frederick County. So real quick, Travis, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
My name is Travis Walter. I'm a clinical social worker, only work in crisis intervention. My journey through that, I have worked in and managed mobile crisis for Frederick and Washington County, ran residential crisis for Frederick County, walk-in crisis for Frederick County. I have also been a crisis clinician at the Frederick Health Hospital's emergency department, doing crisis evaluations with our community members experiencing mental health crisis. And I am the CIT mental health coordinator for Frederick County. So I train all of the first responders on crisis intervention.
Thank you. And that's what we're going to talk about today a little bit more. So our series here, we're discussing emerging issues and innovations in law enforcement. We really like to talk about the mental health partnership. So we'll go with the first question, but what is the value of law enforcement partnering with the local mental health organizations in their jurisdiction?
I think there's two major benefits for that. On the law enforcement side, the way law enforcement is structured, they're the first ones to respond to so many situations, and they're unfortunately not just there to do their mission, which is to protect and serve, but they're also working as social services. They're working as social workers. They're doing everything. And so having that mental health collaboration with law enforcement allows them to focus on the safety aspects, focus on the peacekeeping and the law aspects, and having somebody else who's specifically trained to do the mental health piece. On the flip side of that, on the mental health workers pure, there's a lot of things that we know how to do academically, but that we can't actually enforce, or certain doors that we're not able to open that law enforcement can, just by nature of the work that they do. And so having that law enforcement partnership with us allows us to have greater access to resources, quicker access to resources a lot of times as well as ensuring our safety when we're dealing with situations that can become volatile.
Thank you. Because part of our series that we do talk about is de-escalation. As you know, the Police Accountability Act of 2021 includes de-escalation in the actual wording. So obviously these the mental health and police collaboration is important, and kind of leads us right into our next question. Do you know of any existing data showing the benefit of a police mental health collaboration? Examples like maybe a reduced calls for service to repeat people that we've seen before in the public?
So I don't have specific numbers, and so I apologize about that. But nationwide, there's been a lot of different kind of de-escalation and crisis models, and some of them are mental health pure, some of them are law enforcement pure, but more and more we are seeing that collaboration and where there's integration of the two fields together. Overall, what that has shown, and again, I don't have specific numbers, is that it does actually create or reduce the number of calls, repeat calls for service. People are able to get what they need quicker, regardless of which way they've accessed resources, because they have both of those fields right there together. One of the other wonderful things that we are seeing is now that we've had this bigger collaboration, and we've seen that right here in Frederick County with the crisis response team here in the city. And then I know the sheriff's department is also working on something similar with mobile crisis. But we're seeing a reduction in the number of people entering the criminal justice system, because a lot of the situations that are happening are mental health crisis that has resulted in a crime, but because we're able to get them the mental health resource, that's resolved, and the criminal recidivism is way less, and so we're able to help that situation as well. So we're seeing lower numbers on both sides by having this integrated team.
And that's great that we have that partnership right here in Frederick also, especially with the Frederick Police Department.
I will also say, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I would also say from the hospital standpoint, being able to have this collaboration, we are seeing a lot less people needing to come into the emergency department on emergency petitions, because there is that mental health presence with law enforcement right there at the beginning. And so people are able to be stabilized in the community versus needing to go to that higher level of care. So what that has done is it's allowed our emergency room, our emergency department, to actually focus on true medical emergencies, and for the more acute mental health cases that are coming through, versus just having this onslaught of anyone and everyone come in.
Yeah, that's definitely a benefit. And you think of also police officers out there to answer the calls for service. They're not being tied up at the hospital for an hour or 2 hours, just waiting for the person to be seen for the emergency evaluation. So that's definitely important. So during your introduction, you did talk about crisis intervention training. So what is the effectiveness of police officers participating in a crisis intervention team training?
So and not an officer, and so I don't mean to speak negatively or in bad faith about other departments, but I think not having crisis intervention training, specific mental health training, and intellectual disability training, things like that, really is a disservice to officers because they only have what they've seen out in their personal lives. By providing this training, and all of the officers here in Frederick County go through it. I believe all the officers in the state of Maryland actually go through it. We are, our state's really good about that. It allows officers to have some formalized training for the situations we know they're going to interact in. This helps them feel more comfortable. It helps them have better insight into what might be going on. It also helps them kind of reduce their fear or stigma about people that they might be interacting with. These trainings, it's 40 plus hours of the mental health portion through the academy, and then in services that go through every year. And we really do a lot of that classroom knowledge, but then we really try to do a lot of hands-on so that they really get comfortable utilizing those skills, and get to demonstrate those skills, so that we can retrain as needed.
Well, thank you for that. How about how many classes do you hold a year on average?
So we do the academy every cycle. So here in Frederick, that is at least one, if not two, just depending on the way the cycle runs, because the academy is pretty long. And then we've been doing in-services. One of the things that we're currently setting up is a 24-hour in-service for all first responders. So it'll be a mixture of the local departments, so FPD and the Sheriff's Department, some, like Thurmont and Brunswick would be included, but also DFRS. So our fire and rescue teams, with their interactions with folks as well. And so that'll be a good in-service, and we're planning to do that quarterly so that we can actually rotate all of the service personnel through.
That's great, and kind of goes right along for our next question. What additional training do you think law enforcement or just public safety in general should provide their personnel related to mental health calls for service?
So I think we absolutely need to continue to have refreshers on mental health struggles, what that looks like, the characteristics of different mental health disorders. Officers and first responders don't need to be able to diagnose or do any of those things, but to recognize that somebody might be struggling with their mental health and could be diverted to a different place, or need a little bit different care in the situation. One of the things that we try to incorporate is information on values and implicit bias. We all have them, and there's nothing wrong with having your personal values or your bias, but we need to make sure that that's not bleeding into our interactions. So that's something we really focus on. And I think the other big push right now is officers and first responders, all of the public safety community, also recognizing signs within themselves and their fellow staff. The last 3 years have been hard. The last 20 years have been hard. It's not just the pandemic, but there's been a cultural shift over the past decade where people don't, our community members don't necessarily trust law enforcement or, the rest of the public safety world. And that takes a toll on, the individual's mental health. And so we really are starting to focus on officer mental health and emotional stamina, helping them make sure that they're reaching out when they're struggling before it becomes an issue, helping normalize that, helping provide them safe places to go to get that help. But also ensuring that they're able to actually just stay on the job. Public safety is hard. It is not an easy profession. And people chose to go in this because they have a true passion for their community. And so we want to do everything possible and help educate them so that they have the skills and the resources to stay in this profession as long as they can.
Yes, you definitely hit on some great points. I mean, many government agencies have employee assistance programs that the officers or firefighters, EMTs should be aware of. And also, I know around Frederick and elsewhere in the state, they have their CISM teams, their critical incident stress management teams. So ensuring that they have adequate personnel for peer support and so on.
Well, and I know that, DFRS here in our county, they've actually employed a mental health worker who helps coordinate training and provides direct support. And I know that the law enforcement side have been looking at how do they incorporate that as well. But there's stigma. Everybody's worried, oh, if it's through the department, my commander is going to find out, or, my sergeant. And so there's a little bit of concern around that. So we also like to try to talk to them about outside of the agency resources that are no charge to them, so they don't have to use their insurance. There's really no paper trail so that people are actually getting the help when they need it and feel safe and supported.
Well, thank you for that, because that's very important for everyone involved. And one of our last questions, we talked about the partnerships overall, but what advice would you give to a law enforcement or public safety agency who want to explore a police mental health collaboration?
I think the biggest advice is, it sounds really simple on paper to make that collaboration, but it's two very different fields, very different educational backgrounds, all of that. Even ideological outcome, thought process. It's all different, and so making that integration can be difficult. I think the way to make that successful is to truly create a team and not just have the different components who just get thrown together. I think we really learned this with the crisis response team here in Frederick, where we had multiple people from the different teams that were interacting at any given time. They've changed that, and it is specific workers from each one of those teams who collaborate together, who are always together. It creates shared values. They get to know each other. They get to understand how each other are thinking in their process, and it makes everything go a lot smoother. So anything possible to truly create that team atmosphere and not just a team on paper. I think that is really the most important piece. And that can include all sorts of things. One of the things we've done here is doing joint training. And so that everyone's getting the same type of information, the same type of training. So everyone's on the same page before they go out into the field and are actually actioning things.
Well, thank you. Is there anything else that you'd like to add you think is important for our listeners or anyone reviewing this video?
I would say my last pieces of things, public safety, we do not have enough people. If that is your passion, do it well. On the mental health side of things, same thing. We can never have enough. As of right now, we're not ever going to be able to take the mental health piece out of the public safety realm. And so embrace it, learn it, do it the best that you can. But at the same time, make sure you're actually taking care of yourself. Again, this work is very hard. Nobody can really pretend that it is not. It is going to take a toll, but there is resources out there that, the department cultures have changed. Leadership wants you to get help. They're going to help you get help. Speak up, get your needs met so that it doesn't affect you in the long run.
Well, we truly thank you for your time and your service that you're giving to the community. And hopefully we get to pass this information on that other law enforcement or public safety professionals or those in the mental health or education field can learn from this and, use it for their future. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Captain Henneberry, thank you for joining us today. Can you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name's Kirk Henneberry. I'm a captain, so I always get the Captain Kirk thing with people who meet me for the first time. I laugh like I've never heard that before. So feel free to throw that in there somewhere. I've been a police officer with the Frederick Police Department for a little over 20 years now. I was hired back in October of 2002. So 20-year anniversary was last year. I've had multiple assignments, as you can imagine. Started out in patrol, became a patrol supervisor, went to the internal affairs unit for 5 long years, got promoted to sergeant and lieutenant. I've had a few different commands as a lieutenant, patrol, technology services, and criminal investigations. And then a few years ago, I was promoted to captain. And right now I'm over top of the operational side of the department. So I have the operations bureau. And basically, if you use the restaurant analogy, that's the front end of the house. That's you go into the restaurant, the customer service, the waiter, the waitress taking your order. There's another captain who has the back side of the house who does the support services side of the department.
Well, thank you. Today we're discussing like emerging issues and innovations in law enforcement. So we talk about intelligence-led policing and so on. What technology does your department use to collect and analyze data?
Yeah, so I can break that down a little bit into certain areas we want to analyze. So we want to analyze crime. We want to analyze traffic for safety for motorists. And we also analyze ourselves for how good of a job we're doing delivering service to the community. So looking at crime, we start with our computer-aided dispatch and our records management system. Those are very valuable tools. They keep track of all the calls for service. They have all the details, where, when, why, how, and who was there. So we can do a lot of searches just within our own records management system using mapping. If I want to find out what's happened at FCC in the last 20 years, I can put a circle around Frederick Community College and it's going to show me every call for service there. So attached to our records management system is another product that we pay for. It's called Accurate for law enforcement. And the data from our records management system flows into that database. And that's where our crime analysts can really get into fine-grained detail. They can type in keywords. If they're looking for a certain type of handgun, they can type in the manufacturer name and it'll pull up every report with that manufacturer in it. They can generate heat maps. They can have a time frame, a week-long, month-long, year-long in a certain area or the entire city and see where specific crimes are happening more often. We use that a lot for opioid overdoses. For example, we see that there's certain spots of the city, certain gas stations close to Route 15 or I-70, 270, where you might have more overdoses by people pulling in, taking a drug, overdosing, or a motel. So we can see where hotspots are for certain things through our Accurate for law enforcement software. That's a pretty common software industry-wide. There's also a public-facing side of that, which is Community Crime Map. So once our reports are approved through records, then that data will flow to the community side. So you can go to the city website and go to the Community Crime Map, and you can look at certain neighborhoods and see what kind of crimes have been happening there. Usually a 4 to 5 day delay on that, just because we want the report approved up through the chain of command to make sure it's labeled accurately and has all the proper information. For traffic, we might be a little old-fashioned on traffic. We don't have anything really fancy, but we do have speed boxes, and we have some software to go with those speed boxes. So when we get a complaint about speeding, for example, on a certain street, we can put up a speed box, and that'll capture the speed data for however long we want to leave it there. And then we can use the software to print a report, show us average speeds, high speeds, time of day speeds, all that kind of stuff, to find out how bad is the speeding problem in this neighborhood. Also for traffic, we look at crash data. We want to do enforcement in areas where we know that there's more danger. So high-speed intersections, the Golden Mile, for example, Route 40 in McCain, Route 40 in Hillcrest, those are the areas we've identified through data analysis where we have the most dangerous accidents with personal injury. So we want to do enforcement out there more so than we would want to do it on a street that might have a slight speeding problem, but we never have a crash. And then the last thing we look at through a tech product called Spider Tech is our customer service. So if a person calls our dispatch with a cell phone behind the scenes in the software, that person will get a text message saying that we received your call, an officer will be there in a certain amount of time, here's your case number. It gives them options to do online reporting if they don't want to wait for a police officer, if it's not a dangerous crime. And then they can do a survey at the end. How satisfied were you with the dispatcher? How satisfied were you with the police officer? Did they help resolve the situation? So we can measure our own customer service that way. Those are the three things I can think of the top of my head, how we use technology to analyze crime, traffic, and customer service.
That's great. You talked about the traffic, how you identified intersections where you make operational decisions for enforcement, but it kind of goes right into our next question is what operational decisions outside of your traffic you just discussed are made from the data that you do collect?
The most frequent operational decision is when we identify a pattern of a certain crime. I'll use theft from motor vehicle as an example, because that's the biggest thorn in our side is we constantly have people breaking into cars and stealing whatever they can get, loose change, sunglasses, laptops, whatever. So we recognize that in certain neighborhoods, a pattern emerges. We've had 10 in the last 3 days in a certain geographical area. Well, obviously, we're going to want to put resources into that area, more police officers into that area, whether marked patrols to deter criminals or have a covert assignment where undercover officers are trying to catch those people in the act. Just basically common sense. You see a problem, it's emerging, it's continuing, you want to get there and address it. Some other examples that are less frequent, if we're going to look at data and see when we're the busiest, we could shift patrol times to have more officers working certain days of the week, certain timeframes of the day. We have a pretty set patrol rotation and schedule. But if we do have compelling evidence that says we have too many officers working at a certain time of day, there's just more officers than calls for service, we can try to move shift hours a little bit different to have the bulk of the officers working during the busiest times. There's just tons of operational decisions you can make based on data collected. We actually, last year, we implemented an online reporting for traffic safety complaints. We go to a lot of community meetings and the common theme is traffic's out of control in my neighborhood. So we wanted to have a better way to deal with that. So we have an online portal. People can go to the city website, type in their location, what the problem is. We have a decentralized traffic unit. The corporal will get those complaints emailed to him. He'll try to have a speed box deployed to that neighborhood to see if the data really is showing significant dangerous speeds and crashes. If it does, we'll do selected enforcement. We'll put officers out there to run radar, watch stop signs, things like that, and issue warnings and write some tickets. Then we circle back with the community and say, here's what we did. Try to get that customer satisfaction piece closed, that whole loop closed.
That's great. So we'll talk about that here in a second with community policing and so on. It's kind of related to community policing, but how significant is real-time intelligence in today's policing?
Yeah, that's the battle because a lot of times it's a constant challenge to stay on top of things. Once we start seeing a pattern emerge, it might be over, but by the time we recognize it. So we'll put officers in one of those hotspot areas, but it might be too late. That criminal knows if I hang out here too long, they're eventually going to catch me. So they might just do that for a day or two. By the time we're there, they're across town in another part of the city. So I think what's really important with real-time intelligence is regional collaboration. You know, just because there's a border at the city of Frederick, it doesn't mean that the crime the city's experiencing is different than what Frederick County, Northern Virginia, South Pennsylvania, Panhandle of West Virginia, wherever. A lot of these series are regional. So we need really good relationships with other police departments, sharing intelligence bulletins. So we know, you know, if Montgomery County's having an issue, it could well be that they're going to move up towards Frederick. A recent example of quick intelligence sharing was about a month ago. A grocery store in Walkersville was robbed. Maryland State Police handled that. They didn't identify the suspect at that point, but they let regional agencies know. We have a good partnership with the Western Maryland Intelligence Center or Information Center. So we get that bulletin about the robbery in Walkersville. You know, that's a 5-minute drive outside the city. A couple days later, we have a robbery here in the city of a grocery store, same modus operandi. Patrol sergeant calls MSP, gets a copy of the report. Hey, we saw your bulletin. Can we see the report? We just had a similar incident. Yeah, this description's meeting our description. So that helped us identify the suspect in charge, and it helped MSP close out their case. But we wouldn't have been so on top of it if we already didn't have MSP's bulletin. We would have been kind of starting from scratch with our incident, but we already were ahead of the game because we knew they had just had a similar incident. You know, if you really want to get high-level police work, which you used to do, Jason, with long-term investigations, you need a lot of pre-investigation and a lot of probable cause when people, drug trafficking organizations, bank robbers. You might identify a person, but you know there's something bigger at the end of that investigation. So you might get authorized to get warrants to track these people through a phone or a tracking device. And that is real-time information. When you see a phone ping or you see a tracker ping and you know where that person's going to build up a bigger investigation, that's probably the biggest example I can think of. We had a bank robbery series several years ago where Baltimore County had developed some information on the suspect, and they got a warrant to track his vehicle. And we had information he was coming to Frederick, and we see the car pinging on the way to Frederick. So we had a plan to get officers at certain banks. And that morning it happened. And sure enough, he pulled into one of the 4 banks we were watching, and we were able to catch him as he's walking up to the bank, putting a mask on. So that's a perfect example of real-time intelligence. That takes a ton of work, though, and a lot of evidence to get judges to issue search warrants.
Yes, I remember that was a lot of collaboration between multiple agencies and intelligence sharing. So that was a very interesting one too. So we're going to shift gears a little bit since we were talking about the intelligence-led policing and going back. You're talking about the speed enforcement, reporting back to the community, because we know that partnership has to be there between the community and the police. So while community policing may look different based on the size of the agency and where you may be located, what are some ways the Frederick Police Department engages with the community?
Yeah, we shifted philosophy several years ago. So it's been a long time, actually, probably 15 years at least. We had a community services division, and those officers were the ones trained to go out to community events and do event planning, literally event planning. We're going to create the event. We're going to invite the public. We got away with that because we wanted all officers to have a hand in this and just try to get all hands on deck and ingrain it into a patrol officer's daily duties. Is that part of your responsibilities when you're out in that neighborhood is to go into the businesses, say hi to the manager, ask them they having any issues, do they need anything? Find some time during your shift to do a walking patrol in a park and talk to people and get to know them, so that you're taking full ownership of your assigned beat. You're getting to know residents, business owners, and evaluate officers on that. Are they actually getting out of their car, making contact? Are they going into businesses, saying hi? Are they hearing about issues that they can handle and following up and trying to address those issues? So that's how we try to implement community policing. It's at the officer level. Now we do have a unit, one of their side responsibilities is an outreach function. They will take point on things like National Night Out that requires some more significant planning. But what we try to do, community policing is involving the community. So we're not trying to be event planners. What we want to do is we want community groups to plan events, and we can collaborate with them and add to it. Do demonstrations, bring officers in, and not being the person throwing the party, but being the people invited to the party and a part of that event to collaborate. The whole point of community policing is to, instill the badge as a symbol of public trust. I'm your local officer. You can trust me. Give me information. I'll try to address your problems. So we really want the community to take lead in event planning, and we will be there every time, whether it's Coffee with a Cop, National Night Out. We have in the city neighborhood advisory council meetings. Our officers will be there. But really, we want to start at the ground level with officers, just knowing their beat, knowing people in their beat, developing that public trust, and developing information and collaboration to help solve problems in neighborhoods.
That's a great philosophy and approach. Which, when we talk about police officers, what skills do you think your police officers who are at the ground level need to have to make community policing work?
Yeah, that's the basic one is people skills. That's not everybody has people skills. I'm more of an introverted person sometimes, believe it or not. But a new officer out of the academy, some of them have a lot of life skills. They're great conversationalists. Some of them, grew up playing video games their whole lives and they haven't had a whole lot of life experience. But we need people to be able to go out in the community and say hi to people, be friendly, be approachable, ask them how they're doing. And then on top of that, they need to have skills to know how to solve problems. So a lot of what we teach kind of 3 philosophies for community policing. A lot of that is that collaboration, and then you hear about a problem, you bring the community in to try to solve it. So that's community-oriented policing. The police are a big part of the solution, but the other part is the community to help get the information to us, take our advice on potentially making things about that community safer, environmental studies and things like that. We teach data-driven policing. So if there's a crime series, it's not necessarily relegated to one community. The officers know how to crunch the numbers and deploy accordingly. And we teach problem-oriented policing. So there's that skill you're looking for, is that we're teaching officers how to look at a problem and try to identify the root cause so that they're not just kind of hitting the symptoms and really not fixing it, but they're kind of focusing down on what's really creating this problem. So that's the skill that we teach. The skill that might be more innate to a person is those people skills where they can go out, have a conversation and just be relatable, trustworthy, instill confidence. Really, if you're calling the police and an officer comes out flat affect, not making eye contact, not showing empathy, not interested, obviously you'll feel better if you have an officer who's engaged with you, giving you feedback, communication feedback and things like that, and instilling confidence in you.
So in 2021, Maryland passed the Police Accountability Act, and some of the language and the new use of force was de-escalation. Now, I know de-escalation has been around for a while, taught in the police academies, but what is the importance of de-escalation training in law enforcement, and what methods are used at the Frederick Police Department to evaluate one of your officers' effectiveness in de-escalating a situation?
Yeah, you're right. De-escalation isn't anything new. We call it verbal judo, and you and I were probably in the police academy. The whole point is, it's sort of like the doctor's oath that the doctor doesn't want to do more harm. A patient comes in, they don't want that patient going away unhealthier than when they came in. A police officer shows up on a scene, they don't want to make things more chaotic. They want to bring order to chaos. So the first step in that is communication that doesn't throw sparks onto a fire that's already going, right? My analogy is words can be sparks. So if you're in a volatile situation, you don't want your words inflaming the situation. You actually want to bring order out of that chaos. So police accountability, 2021, de-escalation, that was great, but that's something we've been doing for years. It's a new term. We call it tactical communication now instead of verbal judo. The main thing we teach is that people want to be asked more than they want to be ordered. So we ask people to step out of the car first. We're not, get out of the car. It's simple things like that you're not throwing oil into a fire. The first way we evaluate an officer's performance in that is the old-fashioned supervisors observing daily interactions with people. Body cam has made it possible that we can observe every officer interaction with people. We don't have such a robust system that a supervisor can watch every interaction. But if there is a use of force situation, all uses of force are reviewed up the chain of command to make sure the officer did things at the beginning, like trying to diffuse the situation with language. If the officer had to use force, then was it appropriately applied? Was it commensurate with the level of resistance and things like that? So not only old-fashioned supervisory observation of an officer's communication techniques, but now we have body camera to see all the communication. Did the officer come in here and make things better with his words, or did the officer come in here and maybe they were a little bit hyped up and used the wrong words and made the situation worse? Yeah, I think it's important to note too that the vast majority of situations in reviewing these things, the officers generally do a great job with communication. It's sort of an innate thing with police officers is I'm not here to make it worse. I'm here to make it better. Some majority of officers have those people skills to calm things down. The important thing to note though with de-escalation is sometimes you get to a situation and from the first moment, there's no opportunity for words because there's an assault in progress. So you immediately just have to go hands-on with somebody to protect another person. That's the important thing for the public to know is there's not always an opportunity to try to calm things down with words.
Well, you actually talked about the body camera, and I see you're wearing one there on the video. I know the Frederick Police Department initiated its body camera actually several years ago. Has the body camera footage helped enhance the FPD's annual in-service training? And also, what other benefits has the body camera program provided? And you just hit on one of them by reviewing for use of force.
Yeah, so we've had them for quite a while. 2016, we had a small pilot program, less than 20 cameras, and then we eventually got them to everybody in a uniform assignment. And then just last year, every single officer has two now. In case the battery dies, you have a second one to put on. So a great investment by the city. It's very expensive. The city approved all that funding. It has enhanced our in-service training, entry-level training, roll call training. It's enhanced every method of training we have. We actually have a method of tagging videos in our software. So all these videos that get captured here, we can, with Bluetooth on the officer's issued cell phone, the officer can put the case number linked to that video, and then from a drop-down list, say it's either evidence or could be a training demo, a whole different slew of options that officer can pick. Usually the officer's picking evidence because that's what the officer's doing the most is handling incidents. But the ones that are marked training demo, our training unit will take a look at it and say, how can we incorporate this into any type of training, whether it's in service, annual, roll call, whatever. Now, the positive stuff is the stuff that's broadcast more. Like, here's an example of an officer using perfect de-escalation, giving that person every opportunity to voluntarily comply, but they still don't. They started physically threatening the officer, and here's where the officer had to go hands-on. You can watch the officer properly employing control techniques, etc. So we definitely highlight publicly those well-handled incidents, which are the vast majority of them. Now, we do have times, obviously, when an officer could have done things better. Those can be marked as training demo as well. We don't publicly show them as much because we're not trying to embarrass people, but that's where we can take take that video and go one-on-one with the officer to counsel and retrain. And then our training unit can also take that video and say, how can we take the things that happened in this video and improve our training generally, not harping on the specific officer or incident, but how can we generally enhance our training based on what we learned from that specific video?
Well, I really appreciate your time today and your answering our questions. Is there anything that you would like to add or anything you think that we missed that you would like to add to the series here?
I could probably talk forever about policing. If you gave me 500 questions, I'd go all day. I'd just take a swig of water in between. You talked about skills a little bit earlier. You know, the academy training is just, it's a ton of, it's schoolwork, it's practical skills, physical skills, all types of things. But an important thing is really an innate sense of continuing throughout your career to wanting to help people. It's public service. Most police officers, old surveys, new surveys, they get into this job because they want to help people, right? And it's a service profession. We talk about our time in service. So people who have that mindset is that I'm in a service-oriented profession. I'm actually a customer service type of person. People come to me with a problem, I'm supposed to fix it. That's really important for somebody new coming into the job to realize that I need to keep that mindset throughout my career. I'm serving people. Sure, people can get tired of that, but we have to kind of renew our focus and our mission and just stay positive that we're helping people day in and